I'm really happy and thankful to be here, and I'm excited to talk to you all today about money. And I have a confession. I've given 3 other lectures this week, and they were not this. I've never given this talk. I obviously put these thoughts together for this, so this is the first run-through, and I'm excited, and I hope that this works. So, of course, I think having had some wonderful experiences teaching and lecturing, one of the things you learn to do first in many classes, many academic situations, is to define terms, right, and to get some perspective. And so, of course, I Googled, history of money over the last week or two to figure out, to get some perspective and to learn myself so I could bring that to you. So we're going to talk very, very briefly about the history of money. But before we do that, defining terms is important as well, right? So I want to talk about the definitions of money that I came upon that I thought were interesting. The best one that I found, the most beautifully worded one, was this. The internet said that money is an object of value. And of course, it can be used for payments in exchange for goods and services, et cetera, et cetera. I really clung to this, and I liked the wording, an object of value, but I actually sort of disagree with that, and I'll tell you why. As I read also and thought about sort of the history of money, it unfolded as follows. So, and this is a real quick one. So first, of course, there was bartering. Like, here's a cow, give me a few goats, we're good, go on with your day. But sometimes bartering didn't work, of course. This is the very fast, short, shoot from the hip history of money. So sometimes bartering didn't work because maybe you just didn't need any more cows, but I still really needed the goats or something like that. So what happened was people started to use commodity money, and everyone sort of agreed on using things that most people really always needed and wanted to have. So seeds, salt, tea, tobacco, things like that. Okay, so it was like phase 1. Phase 2, people said, all this is great, but it's really heavy to carry around these seeds or to keep dragging my cattle when I want to go buy something. So the next phase was paper and coin money. I'm not going to go into detail. I think we know what that looks like and what that is. But what's interesting is the thing in and of itself, the coins, the paper, these were valuable items, so precious metals, right? And then we went into this phase of representative money where we, humankind, said, look, forget actually carrying around gold. Let's carry around something else. It'll represent value. We'll all agree on that, and everyone's cool. So that was the next phase, right? Just using non-precious, intentionally using non-precious things to make our money out of and exchange those. And then there was this other phase I felt like I felt obliged to mention. Fiat money, I'd never heard of that one. Fiat is Latin for let it be done, and basically money was given value by governments, not just sort of everyone agreeing, yeah, we all like gold, we'll use the gold standard, that's fine, or this is equivalent to X number of cattle. But governments started setting the terms and in fact made it, this is where legal tender sort of came into play, and it's actually illegal to refuse that tender for other things if you can't make up your own money. That's kind of what happened there. But here's what I found important about this very quick history. Money used to have real value. It used to be real stuff that we could actually use. You get the seeds, you get the goats, and you use them. And then it was actually valuable, metal and paper and that sort of thing. But today it's just paper, right? The money itself has no inherent value. I think that's important, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So it's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing that I found lovely about history, and actually because it's one of my favorites, has anybody here ever read Structure of Scientific Revolutions, Thomas Kuhn? Yeah? Okay, let's talk after. It's great. But basically, I guess I shouldn't have brought that up because I don't want to go into detail about it. But there are these interesting moments of agreement throughout history where paradigms shift, and you could argue, if you were Kuhn, that maybe those aren't necessarily in an order that definitely leads to progress. But I like to think that the history of money does show some progress, and that's a good thing. And there are these lovely moments of agreement where basically we as a society said, now this is what money means. Let's keep that in mind too, and we're going to come back to that in a few minutes. So that was the history of money, and I very much appreciated the kind introduction, and I didn't know what would be said, so I thought I would do also a quick history of me, so you know sort of what my thoughts have been throughout throughout my life sort of about this topic. This is a really condensed version. But basically, I grew up with some angst and some stress about money, mostly because I had learned at an early age through my church and through different exposures to nonprofits that there were poor people out there, and poor people did not have money. And more importantly, they didn't have the things that money could buy: food, clothing, shelter. It freaked me out. I was nervous and panicked and thought about them a lot, but I didn't know what to do to really help. And I quite frankly felt like most of what I did was sort of this really bizarre interaction where I'd get all panicked. I'd hear these enormous, mind-numbing statistics about the number of people living in poverty across the planet. But then the call to action was often just this very, very small thing, and often it had to do with money, which as certainly a relatively wealthy individual in the global sense, but as a middle-class American young white girl was just, it's not like I had piles of money sitting around to give. So I felt confused as to how to help. I didn't know what my relationship with poverty and with the poor, and again, people that had a different amount of money was supposed to be like, and it stressed me out. And most of the stories, the reason I have this picture up is most of the stories I heard about the poor, again, people without a lot of money, were ones that were based on sadness and suffering and desperation and hopelessness. So I started to associate, it is, I think, fitting that happiness and money are topics that were sort of paired in this series, because often people tie them together for better and for worse. And I started to understand and to believe that if somebody was poor, things just all around in every facet of their lives were really bad. And so whenever I'd think about that and encounter poverty in any sense of it, of course I felt bad and I felt scared, and I had all these other, to let you into my psyche, I had all these other emotional issues too, where I thought, oh my God, I feel guilty about my own relative wealth, and in fact I kind of even feel shameful. I started to feel bad about my relationship with money as I understood other people's relationships with it and their lack of it. So over time, thank God, I had some experiences that allowed me to see the average person living in poverty not like this. I stopped listening as much to those stories that very well-intentioned nonprofits and NGOs told me for the sake of getting my money to them. Again, I get it. I get that is a strategy. But I started to tune out those stories, and I think that was a good thing, because it allowed me to open myself up to other stories of the poor and of poverty. And I started to meet individuals who, were poor, but also were hardworking, smart, strong, often very happy entrepreneurs who were doing everything right, doing everything that they could to lift themselves and their families out of poverty. And of course, through this process, I learned about microlending and microloans, which was fascinating. And for any of you for whom this is a new term, just think tiny, tiny loans for somebody living on just a few dollars a day. And actually, microfinance, if you hear that word, think about all the services and products you might get at your bank, and imagine those tailored to the needs of somebody living on very little. So microinsurance, very small savings accounts, things like that. But microlending was the thing that I got psyched about, because it made me, I started to understand that with this tiny infusion of capital, just a little bit of money, the whole trajectory of somebody's life, financially and in many other ways, could be shifted. So I was just in love with this idea. So I guess, gosh, what is it even now? 8 years ago, I was tromping around East Africa, and I met entrepreneurs, and with my co-founder, Matthew, we started to have this dialogue that basically went as follows. Wouldn't it be great to keep in touch with these amazing entrepreneurs? They have a different story than we'd been told growing up throughout our lives. Not the child sponsorship, feel bad story, but this empowered, strong, dignified story. Wouldn't it be great to stay in touch with the goat herder and the seamstress and the farmer that I met here in East Africa, and actually rally our friends and family to maybe provide them with loan funding, and then just stay in touch and see how that goes? Wouldn't that be fun? It was not as, I like to read business school case studies about Kiva, because often at the moment, the birth of Kiva, the origin of the idea, it's this big words, thus was born the idea for the world's first peer-to-peer microlending marketplace. No, it was, wouldn't it be cool to stay in touch with a goat herder? I could probably leave my camera and my cell phone, and there's coverage here, and this would be great. It was very simple and very, an idea that was really from the heart, not necessarily the head. So what we did was go around the world, take pictures of entrepreneurs, and literally this was me running around with my camera at first. We scaled, we got a little more smart about how to grow, but basically put stories of entrepreneurs on a website, included, that's the real entrepreneur there and there, included what they told as their stories, these stories of hope and dignity and of growing ventures. Put their loan needs up, drove traffic to it, and of course Kiva unfolded over the last several years. And today, it's just been so fun to watch and so interesting And I feel so honored to be a part of the very beginnings of it, but of course it's way bigger than any one of us. And then, I mean, there are thousands of people every day that make it happen. So Kiva's grown very, very quickly, and it's crossed 400 million in loans in about 216 countries around the world. And these little $25 bits from friends and family and their friends and family and on and on and on across the planet, loaned to real individuals who have been able to share this different story of their lives. So what I get really psyched about is not just the money moving around, that's great, but as I'm about to share with you, I don't think money is the point. It rarely is, almost never is. But what's exciting to me is this different kind of dialogue, this different kind of relationship that's built. So it's not just the traditional sort of donor-beneficiary relationship that I saw for most of my childhood and adolescence. And it's not just throw change in the jar and then go on with your life, and you don't have to think about these sad stories anymore. It's much more engaged, it's much more ongoing. It turns out loans are a very sticky tool for connectivity. And so what happens, ideally, is that lenders can go onto this site and have this participatory sort of experience where over time they see things unfold, they watch other amazing individuals around the world basically continue to develop and to write their stories, and they get to experience that. So the best and most, the thing that I feel luckiest about, if I'm just really selfish about this experience, is that by meeting entrepreneurs in very unexpected places, and by finally understanding what business and entrepreneurship at its heart, at the core of it, is really about, allowed me to give myself permission to be an entrepreneur. I didn't mention it, but actually I kind of did. I studied philosophy and poetry and not business undergrad, and so I went to East Africa, 8 years ago to start off this journey, not knowing the difference between profit and revenue. So I would have laughed if at that moment in time you'd have ever told me that I would be asked to talk about money, because I did not understand it at all. It took me five tutors for 4 classes, my first quarter in business school at Stanford. I was definitely starting off without much of an advantage there. So I figured it out, I learned business, but what meeting these entrepreneurs allowed me to do is finally give myself permission to choose this kind of path, the kind of path that they were living. So that's my story, a little bit of it, the history of me, and also I have to do this because I have to get it out of my system. I'm also a mom. These are my babies. They're awesome. They say hi, and my amazing husband is here too, Reza. But this is Cyrus and Jasper. They're twins. That's a whole other talk, by the way. But they actually do come up in another slide or two, so there they are. Okay, so that's me. So money, and then my story. Money, I just told you my story, and money is a part of it, right? My understanding of it, my relationship with it, is something that I'm okay talking about to a degree, right? It's not that uncomfortable, but it is a little bit awkward. I think inherently awkward for anybody to get up and talk about their relationship personally with money and what it means to them. And something occurred to me this morning as I was thinking about vulnerability and awkwardness on stage, and I think it's worth it, so I'm going to tell you a 20-second sort of tangent. In college, there was this, I was like a sophomore, and there's this senior who wrote this monologue for a theater class, and her monologue basically was standing on stage for about 10, 15 minutes, saying, of course, nobody remembered what she said, but throughout the process, slowly taking her clothes off, and by the end, she was fully naked. And in the middle of central Pennsylvania, like Amish country, I went to Bucknell University, this was such a shocker. This was like such a big deal on campus, caused a lot of stir. Now, I was thinking about this. I was actually thinking, what would it be like, not literally, for me to strip down naked up here and to be vulnerable, right? I did actually think about doing that, but there's so many reasons why that might not be the best idea. First of all, I want you to remember me for my brain, not my body, right? Also, for anyone who's had kids, there's kind of a lot of explaining to do about like what's happened here. I have 2 words for you: tandem breastfeeding. I'm not even going to go there, but that is another talk, right? Anyway, it would be a little distracting. All right, let me see something. Oops. Okay. So anyway, I'm not going to do that. But what I'm going to try to do is sort of get as vulnerable, get as naked about money as I can. Y'all, I'm having a little bit of an issue with my notes. Sorry, 1 second. Okay, I'm going to wing it. So one of the things that occurred to me that I could do is just to show you my bank statements. I'm serious. I thought, what would that be like? We're cool. Oh, don't worry, we're cool. We're good. I just couldn't scroll on my notes, but I'm totally fine with that, so don't even worry. But thank you. And I thought, okay, that would be interesting, but that would feel really weird, and how would I really genuinely feel if I did that? Now, first of all, if this is the equivalent of getting naked financially, I thought also, oh my God, that exposes my husband too, which is like really awkward, and also would expose the nakedness of anyone that's paid us or that we'd paid, and then the image just got really weird, so I thought, no, I'm not gonna do that, and maybe this analogy doesn't totally hold, financial nakedness, but I think the reason for me that it would be uncomfortable, and maybe for any one of us to project a little bit, is that our bank statement would sort of tell a story about how we spend our money, and it would sort of reveal these conversations, right? It would say something about us, and we would be afraid, I think, about what it would say about us. Now, I think this language is important because it's not like money would be up here talking, but in some way, I do believe that money talks, and I thought of a few examples that could be interesting to throw out there. So I know that this is not the only thing each of these exchanges could say, but here's something they might say, right? When you make a purchase, what are you saying? I think you're saying something like, hey, baby, I really want you, or at least I need you. Groceries, I need you, I want you. So come here, you're mine. Okay, there's that kind of exchange. When you are giving a donation, what are you saying? You could be saying, at its worst, or not its best, you could be saying, oh my God, I'm so sorry that that's happening for you. So take this, and I hope things work out. Let me know. Okay, and then you go on with it, right? That could be a donation, just sort of this, as I said, change in the jar and walk away. A loan, I think at its best, I imagine sort of this really friendly exchange, maybe like a hug, where you're saying to somebody, dude, no, take it, it's totally cool, it's gonna be fine, just pay me back when you can, I know you're good for it, it's not a big deal, right? A loan is, it's a different interaction, it's a different kind of level of friendliness, I think. An investment might say, I believe that you can do more with this than I can right now, so please take it and do something great, and I also expect something of you when you have this. Give it back to me, hopefully more than I'm giving you. So there's sort of this vote of confidence. And you can imagine being the person on the other side of that, receiving money. It makes us feel good. It's like somebody or an institution, or maybe it's a funder for a startup, is saying, I believe in you, I think you can do a good job, or you have done a great job. There is some sort of dialogue that takes place there. Now, if we saw those bank statements, I think the fear would be that the dialogues that we're having over and over again maybe aren't the ones that we think reveal the best parts of ourselves, and maybe they're not. maybe they reveal selfishness, or even worse, sort of some thoughtlessness about what we're saying every day, all the time, and how our money is kind of flying around to and from. So I wanted to ask the question, what would it mean to live in a way that would make us less afraid and make it less awkward to show those conversations, to reveal those? As I thought about who in my life I've encountered that is least weird about money, I kid you not, the people that came to mind, many individuals that came to mind, were some of the entrepreneurs that I've met along the way through Kiva all over the world. Very poor individuals, actually. And I think that it's less awkward because money is in a different category for them. I think they know, basically, and anybody living in extreme poverty is reminded daily of things that we tend to forget. I think there are 3 truths that they're very in touch with, and here they are. So one, they seem quite aware that money is not the point. They're more thoughtful about it in many ways. I had in that money talk slide different exchanges. I had also imagined, what are you saying when you forget the $20 in your jeans pocket and then you wash it and it's in a big crumpled ball? What are you saying there? You're kind of, you've even forgotten that you have that money, right? This is not something that happens in the lives of these individuals. They remember, not only are they aware of money, they remember that money is not the end in and of itself. Yes, way back in history, it used to have real value, but it is not salt anymore. It is not seeds. You can't wear it, although I know there's somebody here with a money bow tie and it looks awesome. But you can't usually wear money, you can't eat money. It's intentionally non-precious, and I think those living in poverty recognize that it is simply a means to an end. There are other things that they are pursuing. Money might help them get there, but other things might help them get there too. The other thing that they seem very aware of, in my experience, is that the conversations that we have, those conversations, actually can be changed, and they have control over them. They don't need to necessarily take in the message that might accompany a donation or a very small amount of money that they're paid with, or they can even control, they know that they have control over this. They know that we all have the power to guide those conversations, and that even we have the power to choose which conversations we engage in. So, interesting example, I've talked to so many different Kiva borrowers, and some of them, as I ask them what their loan means, some and most will say things like, I feel so happy, I feel so thankful that this global community of people believes in me. So the message with that money, it could have just come from a bank and had nothing else attached to it, but when they understand what Kiva is, and maybe they've even gone online to see their profile and look at the lenders, they feel something really positive because they feel like people have given them a vote of confidence. Sometimes, though, I've also heard, and I think this is funny, I've heard people say, yeah, I saw the lenders, and one of them had a dog as their profile picture. I'm not that concerned about, I don't know that I want to hear what they have to say. Or the most negative thing I've heard is, yeah, I saw a bunch of white people lending me money. I don't think they really need it, and the borrower has felt less inclined necessarily to feel obligated to pay that back. Anyway, negatives and positives, but what I appreciate is that they're very aware. They seem to be very aware of that conversation, and as they have so little to rest their identity on in terms of financial resources, they build it on other things, and they decide to speak in different ways, to control the conversation with money and the conversation of other exchanges in a pretty intentional way. Because they know, this is the third thing, they know that money is just one currency. It's not always the solution, and it can't be always the solution or the best tool for them to get things done in the world. So they know what they want, and they know where they want to go, and when they don't have money, they figure out how else to do it. They don't ask the question that many of us ask sometimes, especially in the startup community, buy versus build. Do we do this ourselves? Do we bring in other people? They don't have a question about that. They simply build. They're entrepreneurs. So they remember that it's just one currency that they have to sort of say who they are in the world and to go do things and to communicate and connect with other people. So what does all this mean? I think if we adopt this kind of mindset, if we put money in its place and remember what it should be, if we take a little bit more of control of the situation and of the conversation, and if we're not afraid to let money be part of our story, that we'll sort of embrace all of the other currencies that we can bring to bear. This is a very positive thing. We have more than just money to spend, and I think we should work for and ask for in our exchanges more than just money to receive. So in work, you can get a compensation package that is very high in terms of financial benefit, but you can also work for things that are meaningful to you, the things in and of themselves, right? Flexibility, ability to work from home, maybe travel, adventures. I feel like the career path I've chosen has not always been the most financially successful. Everything's working out, but I feel like I've gotten paid in other currencies that are so much more important to me in those adventures, and the ability to stand up and share my thoughts with you today, and the ability to meet a lot of different people that I really respect and love, and to choose who I work with, and to choose things to work on that I believe in to my core, to the tips of my toes. So I guess the thought I want to leave you with before we go into Q&A here, I genuinely believe that when we put money in its place, when we are a little bit more thoughtful about it and don't just have these conversations without realizing that we're having them, that we can invest our whole lives, the money and also all of what we have to offer, all of our time, our talents, everything that we have, all of the resources we have to bring to bear in work that we love. And when we do that, our exchanges become richer and more meaningful. We contribute more, we receive more. The conversations that we're having with individuals, with the world, and with ourselves about who we are will change. And as this happens, I think we can all write the next chapter of history, the history of money, the history of our own lives in a more thoughtful and beautiful way. And together, that conversation will change possibilities for all of us, change the way we see ourselves and each other. And through the work that we're doing, contributing our whole selves will slowly but surely change the world. Thank you.